Rose's parents committed suicide in front of her, and overnight, she lost everything: her wealth, her parents, and her dignity. She had no choice but to live in her aunt's storage room. Her aunt, who was selfish and unsympathetic, not only poured cold water on her but also slapped her across the face, offering no kindness at all. Down on her luck, Rose had to take on multiple jobs just to get out of her aunt's house, one of which was working as a bartender. Unfortunately, she ran into some familiar rich second-generation people from her past. Seeing her in a destitute state, they began forcing drinks on her. Just as she was being bullied, a man appeared out of nowhere. He crouched down, extended a hand to Rose, and helped her to her feet. The rich second-generation men who had been arrogant only moments before instantly became respectful because the man was Jack, the chairman of a top-tier conglomerate. He finished the drinks they had forced upon Rose and warned the others not to embarrass her anymore. Rose, curious, asked Jack if he knew her, but Jack didn't answer. Instead, he looked at her with deep affection in his eyes. Back home, Rose's cousin, who was a pervert, started eyeing her. Fortunately, Rose managed to knock him out with a lamp and escape. In the pouring rain, she received a distress call from her best friend, who had nearly been assaulted by a director. Forgetting about her own situation, Rose rushed to her friend's aid and saved her, only to be knocked unconscious herself. Jack appeared again, taking her to the hospital. Her best friend introduced Jack to her, revealing that Jack was actually her uncle. Rose also learned an interesting tidbit about Jack. Years ago, Jack had attempted suicide by cutting his wrists, and it was a girl who saved him. He had been searching for that girl ever since. Outside her hospital room, Jack secretly looked at Rose, revealing the scar on his wrist, and softly murmured, "Rose, I finally found you." Once Rose recovered, she hurried to deliver takeout and bumped into her rival, Amy. Amy publicly knocked over her cake and demanded that Rose clean her shoes. However, Rose exposed that Amy was wearing her discarded secondhand shoes. Furious, Amy tried to slap Rose, but someone intervened. "Who gave you the guts to hurt my woman?" The person who stopped Amy was Jack. Rose thought Jack was supporting Amy, so she prepared to accept the blame, but Jack stopped her. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked. Amy thought Jack was backing her up and became even bolder, commanding Rose to kneel and pick up the broken pieces. Rose felt humiliated, but to her surprise, Jack suddenly pulled her into his arms and asked, "Why do you always let others bully you?" Rose looked at him in surprise, and Amy, thinking Rose was flirting with Jack, angrily threw water at her. Jack immediately took off his coat and draped it over Rose, then withdrew all his investments in Amy as punishment. Amy was stunned. Not content, Amy deliberately had Rose play the violin to make her embarrass herself. The first note Rose played was terrible, and Amy smiled in triumph. But Jack, confident as ever, knew Rose was a skilled violinist. Sure enough, Rose quickly showed off her professional skills, astonishing everyone in the room. Some even handed her business cards, hoping to connect with her. However, Jack seemed displeased. He lifted Rose's chin so she could only see him, saying, "Instead of making connections with other men, you should connect with me." He then gently put a bandage on her wound and publicly announced Rose's new position, his secretary. Jack whispered in her ear, "I know you need money right now, and this job will bring you a generous reward." Rose couldn't refuse. On her first day on the job, Rose accompanied Jack to a drinking party. During the event, a client tried to toast Rose, but Jack blocked every drink. "She's allergic to alcohol," Jack explained and drank in her place. Rose was curious how Jack knew about her alcohol allergy, but Jack simply said it was a guess. When a female client poured a drink for Rose, she secretly drugged it, instructed by Amy, intending to teach Rose a lesson. Rose was dragged into another room by a thug, but Jack noticed something was wrong and saved her. The drug took effect, and Rose ended up sitting on Jack's lap, pleading for help before kissing him. "Don't regret this when you wake up," Jack said, gazing at her deeply, before the two of them became entangled in passion. Afterward, when Rose woke up, she tried to escape, but Jack grabbed her and covered up the hickey on her neck. He also handed her a property transfer contract, offering her a house since she had been kicked out by her aunt. However, Rose was angry, not wanting to be seen as a woman who exchanged her body for favors. Jack, confused, offered her cash instead of the house, which only further irritated her, prompting her to leave his house. Jack pursued her, but found her getting into a client's car. It turned out the client had been secretly pursuing Rose, even sending flowers to Jack's office, making Jack furious, thinking Rose had slept with him and left for another man. However, moments later, Rose walked into Jack's office with a contract in hand. She had used the client's interest to secure the order. Jack, thinking she'd be happy, was surprised to find that he was still angry. Rose, puzzled, stormed out. The situation worsened when the client publicly confessed his feelings for Rose, which Jack witnessed. Enraged with jealousy, Jack exposed the client's past, embarrassing him. He grabbed the roses from Rose's hand with disdain, but Rose argued that he was trampling on someone's genuine feelings and expressed that she actually liked the flowers. Jack's heart ached, but he stubbornly wished them well before leaving. The client, thinking he had succeeded, tried to hug Rose, only to be rejected. Enraged, he joined forces with Rose's aunt to kidnap her. Fortunately, Jack returned just in time to save her. Her aunt, in a fit of rage, cursed Rose's deceased parents, reopening old wounds. Seeing Rose trembling, Jack no longer cared about his anger and tenderly pulled her into his arms. "Don't be afraid. I'll take care of the rest," he whispered. Jack mistakenly thought Rose had accepted the client's proposal, but when she denied it, he secretly felt relieved and adjusted his glasses. Rose then asked him why he kept helping her. Jack internally thought, "Because I want your love," but didn't have the courage to confess. A phone call interrupted their moment. It was Jack's grandfather, who had heard about Jack's relationship with Rose and asked about their connection. Fearing his grandfather might harm Rose, Jack lied, claiming she was just an insignificant woman. Rose overheard this and felt a sense of disappointment. The next day, Rose submitted her resignation, thinking Jack didn't need her as his secretary. Jack panicked and immediately begged her to stay and pretend to be his fiancé. In exchange, he promised to help her investigate the truth behind her parents' bankruptcy. Learning that her parents' death was suspicious, Rose agreed. Seeing Rose move up the social ladder, her greedy aunt plotted to blackmail Jack using her. But Rose bluntly told her that Jack didn't love her and that she was only using him. Jack overheard this and, angry, turned to leave. Little did he know, Rose immediately grabbed her aunt by the neck and warned her that if she tried to harm Jack, she would end them both. Furious, Jack drove fast, taking Rose home and throwing her onto the bed. Rose questioned what he wanted, and Jack grabbed her chin, saying, "I want to sleep with my fiancé. Is there a problem?" Rose reminded him that they only had a contract relationship, but Jack kissed her, silencing her protests. Rose, frustrated, bit him, only for Jack to knock her down onto the bed, asking, "Do you really hate me this much?" Seeing Rose turn her head away, Jack seemed to hear her answer and bitterly muttered, "Forget it," before letting her go. But then Rose pulled him back, straddled him, and said, "I don't hate you. On the contrary, I really like you." She didn't say it out loud, though, because she thought she didn't deserve Jack. Jack kissed her, and they tangled together in passion. The next morning, Jack handed Rose the truth about her parents' bankruptcy, but didn't tell her who was behind it. With the evidence in hand, Rose had hoped that she could rebuild her parents' company. To thank Jack, she cooked him a meal, but ended up burning her hand. Jack hurried to treat her injury, telling her not to thank anyone but to take care of herself. Rose couldn't control her emotions and asked him why he was so good to her. Jack, testing her, asked, "If I say I'm in love with you, would you accept me?" He added, "I'll give you everything you want." Rose didn't answer, and Jack assumed she didn't like him. He then said he was just joking, and both of them felt disappointed. However, the persistent Amy took the opportunity to kidnap Rose. From her, Rose learned that Jack had specifically returned to his home country to develop his career for her sake, which left her in complete shock. But Amy, seeking revenge, intended to kill Rose. Just then, Jack arrived and blocked the attack, only to collapse into Rose's arms. Upon hearing that Jack was willing to sacrifice his life for Rose, his grandfather nearly fainted in anger. He warned Jack that the person responsible for Rose's parents' deaths was Jack's father. If Rose found out the truth, she would surely turn against him. To Jack's surprise, Rose overheard these words and she was immediately struck by immense pain. She had fallen in love with the son of the man who killed her father. In a fit of despair, she drank herself into a stupor. Jack rushed to her side, carried her home, and intended to confess his feelings to her. However, Rose was beyond listening and angrily accused him of being a liar. Meanwhile, Jack's grandfather was suddenly pushed over and fell into a vegetative state. The only people present were Jack's father and Rose. The servants informed Jack that Rose was the one responsible for the incident. Jack, enraged, demanded to know why she did this, but despite his fury, he couldn't bring himself to hurt her. The truth, however, was that it wasn't Rose who pushed his grandfather. It was Jack's father. The two parted in anger. In reality, Jack already knew the truth and had been pretending to be ignorant in order to bring his father to justice. After his grandfather fell into a coma, Jack's father seized the opportunity to become the chairman of the company. When Rose confronted him about her parents' wrongful downfall, he was completely unprepared and ended up confessing everything to her. Rose recorded his confession on her phone. Enraged, he planned to kill Rose, but just as he was about to act, Jack arrived with a team of people. Jack demanded that his father let Rose go, and he was willing to give his father whatever he wanted in exchange. Rose couldn't understand why Jack cared so much about her, until Jack revealed the truth. Years ago, his father had abandoned him in a foreign country, and he nearly committed suicide. It was Rose who saved him. Over the course of 4 years in university, Jack had quietly followed Rose and had already fallen deeply in love with her. Upon learning the truth, Rose was deeply moved and began to cry. She struggled to free herself from Jack's father's dagger and threw herself into Jack's arms. The two embraced tightly, and Jack's father was ultimately taken into custody. When everything settled, Rose and Jack shared their true feelings with each other and kissed sweetly.